AC Inglés presenta Into the Story, el podcast para aprender inglés con historias reales contadas por gente de todo el mundo. Glamorous industry parties, getting paid to attend A-list social events. This was the life that our guest Alexia used to have working in South Africa's television industry. From the outside, her life looked successful and enviable, but the truth was that Alexia daydreamt of adventure beyond her concrete office walls.
So I remember sitting in my apartment the one day, looking at this pamphlet to go and teach in Asia, in this country I had never been to, knew nothing about really. And I just made the decision there and then, and I said, I'm going to do this.
In today's story, Alexia tells us about the time she grabbed her backpack and moved across the world to Thailand, a country she had never been to and a culture she knew nothing about, to begin teaching English, a job that she had never done before. You'll hear Alexia talk about how this experience helped her to heal from her past unhappiness and taught her to approach life with self-compassion and courage. We're calling this story Far Away and Fearless. Before we begin listening, let's talk about some of the vocabulary and expressions you'll hear Alexia say. To seep into. Alexia uses this phrasal verb as a metaphor to describe how her unhappiness at work started to affect her personal life. To seep into literally means a slow flow of water leaking out of something, like a cracked pipe. To seep into. Despondent. This adjective refers to feeling sad or without hope. For example, you could say, after many months of searching, I started to feel despondent about finding a new job. A breaking point. A breaking point is an expression that we use to talk about a peak moment of stress or tension. For example, Alexia speaks about her breaking point as being the moment she decided to quit her job and move to Thailand. Point blank. This expression is used as an adjective to describe the way that someone speaks to you as being very direct and without explanation. For example, you could say that the reporter asked the politician a question point blank. And lastly, comfort zone. This expression describes a situation where you feel safe and relaxed. On the other hand, to step outside of your comfort zone means to take a risk and try something new. For example, you could say, this job is challenging. It pushes me outside of my comfort zone each day. If you need more help with understanding Alexia's story, remember for each episode, you can get a full transcript, vocabulary list, and listening comprehension activities on our website, acingles.com. That's la letra A, letra C, inglés.com. Okay, let's get into the story.
The year was 2016, I think. I was working in the entertainment industry for a television station in South Africa. And I worked in the publicity department for a few years, and then I worked in the marketing department for a few years. And my job basically entailed trying to get publicity and word of mouth for the various TV shows that were on this platform. And from the outside looking in, it seemed really glamorous. I was constantly going to all these different industry events and constantly socializing and seemed happy. It seemed like a good job. But the reality is that I was dealing with really big egos. I was dealing with insane deadlines. I was dealing with a lot of pressure to perform without the real recognition. And it was really impacting me. I was reaching the point where being unhappy at work was seeping into every aspect of my life. A few people had mentioned to me that teaching English overseas was a good option for someone who was looking to travel and to earn money at the same time, which is kind of what I was looking to do. I hadn't traveled much before, and I was really curious about the world and the possibilities of exploring. I ended up looking at Thailand. So looking and speaking to people who had been there before, everyone said to me that Thailand was a beautiful country, a peaceful country, a country with good people. And the more I heard about this country, the more I realized that it sounded like the place where I could heal from a lot of things that had happened in my life that I think had just reached a breaking point. So I remember sitting in my apartment the one day and looking at budgets and looking at this pamphlet to go and teach in Asia, in this country I had never been to, knew nothing about really. Some people thought I was just point blank crazy, like how can you just leave everything and move to a place that you've never been to before? I think the more people kind of said that to me, the more excited I got. And I just made the decision there and then, and I said, I'm going to do this. So I remember getting to the airport and getting all my luggage and just thinking, this is crazy. And I remember leaving the airport, and the very first thing that hit me was the humidity. I'm talking intense, insane humidity. The doors opened at the airport and I walked out of there and I was like, dear Lord, I had no idea how humid and how hot this country is. I hadn't really been exposed to Thai culture and Buddhism really, so coming to Thailand, it was just absolutely everything that you can imagine. I had to rewire in my brain. So the greetings, for instance, learning how to why, which is the Thai greeting, which is like a palms together and you bend a little bit forward, doing that, knowing who to do that to and who not to do that to. So you greet people who are older than you that way, but not people that are younger than you. You're not supposed to show anyone the bottom of your feet in any situation, because in Buddhist culture it's seen as disrespectful because your feet are considered dirty. Avoiding touching the top of people's heads because that's seen as disrespectful, because they believe that enlightenment comes through your head basically, and if you touch anyone's head, you're interrupting the flow of energy. Not really being so bold in your opinions and statements in a public setting. It's very much more of a collective ideology, thinking about the collective before thinking about the individual. And coming from a country that this isn't really something that's ingrained in the culture, it was really hard to kind of be a little bit less selfish and think about other people more than myself, I think. The thing that keeps on coming back to mind is just the acts of kindness that I experienced in Thailand from complete strangers on a continuous basis. It would be anything from being on a really long bus ride and all of a sudden the old lady sitting next to you will give you something to eat and something to drink just because she thinks you look hungry. There was no expectation of what am I getting from this, or hey, you owe me. It was just kindness as part of culture, which I think was the biggest cultural shock for me. It wasn't always like rainbows and butterflies. There were definitely moments of like, what am I doing? This is hard. But I think it's important for us to try and find just opportunity wherever it is. And there's always opportunity. I think if you look hard enough, there's always opportunity to learn, to grow, but you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I remember when I moved to my placement town, it was the town of Tak, which is basically 80 kilometers from the border of Myanmar, up in the north of Thailand, up in the mountains. And it's a really small town. And when I first moved there, I was like a little bit depressed because I had to leave my previous placement and I had to leave my friends, and I was a little bit sad and working through this process. And I remember moving to my apartment, and I had the river, the Ping River, right across the road from me. And I would go and sit there at sunset whenever I could with a book or with a notepad and a pen, and just try and really just heal and kind of just be grateful for the beauty that my life had become. And once I kind of settled in, I found this really beautiful national park that wasn't too far away, and I would jump on my bike on the weekends whenever I had a free moment and would ride to this national park and would do a short little hike up to the top of this waterfall. And I had this spot which was always quiet by this really, really beautiful little waterfall, little cascade. And I would just sit there in nature and just be so happy and so content with what I had in my life. And I didn't have much. I mean, I went from this really flashy seeming job, earning much more money back in South Africa than I was in Thailand. Materially speaking, I had a lot more in South Africa. But in Thailand, kind of letting go of all of these materialistic things and really living such a basic life, I was so happy. And often sitting there at the waterfall, I would just think to myself, like, wow, this is what life is supposed to be. I'm currently living in Barcelona, very happy with the life that I've established for myself here. I'm currently teaching English. But if I'm honest with myself, I think there are things that I've wanted to pursue for many years that I maybe have thought that I'm, not talented enough or not good enough to do. So I'm trying to just find the time and the patience with myself to maybe develop more some story ideas that I've had, to do some writing, focusing more on poetry, which is a big love of mine, and maybe just trying to push myself into, I don't know, maybe exploring these aspects of myself and doing things like this podcast, which is very much out of my comfort zone. But just this continuous thing of like, hey, this fearless girl that lived in Thailand and did all of these crazy things and traveled around Southeast Asia on her own with a backpack. Every day we should be trying to do something that helps us grow. So I think that's where I'm at the moment, is just taking a little bit of a look at my life and seeing if it's time to push some boundaries again.
That's all for today. Si te ha gustado la historia de Alexia y quieres seguir escuchando más episodios de nuestro podcast, puedes visitar nuestra página web, acingles.com, donde tendrás todos los episodios de Into the Story. También encontrarás algunas actividades y materiales de cada episodio para ayudarte a mejorar tu inglés. Thank you for listening. Until next time, we hope you have a good time, or at least a good story to tell.